Hello, listeners, and a heartfelt welcome back to a geek tragedy. I didn't say Greek tragedy. That's very good.
I'm very proud of you.
Known online as Plague Mantle because of Fae things. I'd like to welcome to the world the most erudite human, book geek extraordinaire, and my best friend, Holly Properly, and their new bookcase. How are you, Holly?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. My bookcase is still in its box from IKEA. I haven't built it yet, but I'm very excited to build it because building IKEA furniture is like building adult Lego. It makes me very
my
happy.
favourite thing that you told me about your bookcase was, I was thinking, like, what are you going to do with your bookcase? And you were like, I need to get some fake plants to put in it. I was like, that's novel.
Yeah.
You could have got like a plant display area, but you got a bookcase.
I got a bookcase, but I'm putting books on it. It's not going to be devoid of books. I've run out of bookshelf space because I sort of accidentally keep tripping and falling in bookstores.
Did you manage to just buy the bookcase, or did you go, ooh, and I'll just have one of those, and maybe 3 of those?
Oh, wait, there was...
I bought a bookcase, 2 cat tunnels, one of which is at Stephen's house, and a bag of crisps. I really want a Raskog, but by the time I'd figured out where the Raskogs were, I was getting pretty sick of IKEA as a whole.
That's a wheelie. It's a Raskog.
It's a wheelie trolley.
Animal.
Right.
No, it's like a little wheelie trolley.
Lord of the Rings, isn't it? It's because we're doing Hobbit, and it sounds like something you get in the Hobbit.
It does.
You would find it like under the
mountain. I have to flee
Hobbit.
the Raskog. Yeah.
There you go. It's actually a Hobbit thing. Anyway, the other voice you can hear or person you can see talking is, of course, our very own Savage Man, festival attender, and crafter par excellence, Mark Woodbury. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Stephen. I think, pending the approval of the client, I think I've finished the costume that I've been making for a few weeks now.
Much rejoicing.
In time for the Glastonbury fairy ball thing next month. So, nice. Yes, I think it's okay. But, you never know until the client goes, nah.
What is this? Oh, well, I wish you luck with that. Hopefully they'll be all right with it.
Yes, I'll find out tomorrow.
Hidden behind the scenes, our producer and long-suffering small violin, especially one used by a dancing master, or Kit, if you prefer, who should now be named Pochette.
Huh?
Well, a small violin is often called a kit, especially if you're using one used by a dancing master.
Well, he's really been
often called a Pochette, so you see.
Digging into the drag corners of the internet for Kit.
I've got more for next episode.
Okay, well, I know what you've been doing then with your week is looking for
that took me a whole
new Kit stuff. But apart from that, how have you been?
I've been all right. I've been good. We had an excellent Cthulhu game at the weekend, which was very good fun. And I spent most of today and a lot of yesterday finishing off the design of a board game, which was grand. But there is sad news, Mark, very, very sad news, which I hold really horribly in my heart, because last Thursday we went to see Big Trouble in Little China and Holly hated it.
Oh, no. How can you hate it?
Because, I don't understand how any of you people could have thought that I would have liked it. I enjoyed the first 5 minutes because that's where all the quotes are that Stephen talks about all the time, and the rest of it was just people pulling stupid faces and making stupid noises, which are my 2 least favourite forms of comedy.
I'm doing really excellent exposition. Why are you here? Where did you come from? What are you doing? Great.
I'm Gracie Law. Ugh.
That won't
Honestly,
bother us again.
People.
What won't bother us again?
I can't. I just couldn't. I absolutely just couldn't.
I laughed the whole way through, personally. I loved it.
Everybody, there were 100 people in that cinema. They'd sold over 100 tickets for people to go and watch Big Trouble in Little China in Harbour Lights in Southampton. And everybody was laughing except me. And I haven't been in that position for a very long time, but basically there's a moment in it where Kurt Russell, who I do love, I'm a big Kurt Russell fan.
You'll be glad to know I'm going to drag one of his films into our discussion of The Hobbit this evening.
Excellent. Is it overboard? That's my favourite cut. That's so fun. No, that's such a shame.
Barrels.
Yeah, exactly. It's got C in it. There's a moment in Big Trouble where it's that after the first time they see Lopan and Jack Burton runs through him with his truck. That they go into this room and then they escape through like tunnels that they have to crawl through, and I knew that I was not. I knew that I would spend the rest of it huffing and puffing and being just quite disgruntled about the whole thing when he stops in the middle of a chase, in the middle of a tunnel that is covered in like detritus to take off his shirt for no reason, and then once he has taken off his shirt for no reason, and he makes it through the empty streets back to the uncle's house, he's washing his fucking clothes. So he could have just washed the shirt if it had gotten dirty, if that's why he took it off. Who knew? If it had gotten sweaty, he could have washed it at that point. But no, it was just an excuse to get Kurt Russell semi-naked.
I'm mentioning this now.
I'm sure you do.
Okay. On Above Ground Tests this week, we'll be making every effort to continue with our discussion of Tolkien's best-selling children's book, There and Back Again. Last week, we recalled our most intimate memories, listening to Mark and Holly really fall into their past and share the love that stories have in their hearts, has paved the way for us to crack on and explore a different kind of passion. The films that both of you might have. I'm sure you've got your passions for the films. And I'm not talking about the animated film from the 1980s or 1970s when it was, because that was quite good. They managed to get like a whole book into 90 minutes rather than sort of like 8 hours of tiresome film. But Mark, you were going to say, so you sighed deeply when I mentioned the animated film.
No, I was sighing because I still haven't seen it yet.
Oh!
Which is a great shame. I've seen the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, first part of the Lord of the Rings, which never got
Terrifying.
finished, but I've never seen the animated Hobbit, and I'd like to.
Good. Well, today I want us to wander through the Barad-dûr of the trilogy of films that they turned one small book into. And if you love the trilogy and you're listening to this, you may want to close your ears or just send us angry emails, because I'm pretty sure that we are fellowship on this subject. Well, sort of the fellowship. The fellowship before it kind of wandered off and sort of started doing side quests.
Yeah, I saw a great meme about that I put into a project management deck for work. Someone was saying, like, the best thing about... I sent it to you as well, didn't I? I'm just going to stop talking now and let you finish your introduction.
You didn't send it to me. I don't know what it is. I'll
send it to you, buddy.
Before we get stuck into that, let's see if we can poke Mark sharply with a stick and get him to do the jingle for On This Day as we turn to that particularly exciting desk now.
On this day, on this day, on this day, on this day. I think the pause between the last two on this days is quite important, really.
It gets longer every time.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's going to take an entire episode next time.
I think the first jingle was sensible. This one's getting weird. It's got like explanations at the end of it. It's odd.
I'm working on it. Okay, I'll work it up to a full orchestral number.
Okay. Today, it's the 3rd of February when this is the release. So why don't you kick off with an exciting fact from the 3rd of February?
On February the 3rd, on this day, in 1863, Samuel Clemens first uses his pen name in a Virginia City newspaper, the Territorial Enterprise. What was that pen name?
He named his pen?
Well, go and tell us. I know, because I've read the notes.
Yeah, I wrote it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, that was dumb. It's Mark Twain.
Where?
Fucking right, okay. On this day in 1928, paleoanthropologist Davidson Black reports his findings on the ancient human fossils found in China. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of the city.
Oh, go on.
In Zhoukoudian.
Better than Mark last week.
Oh, yeah, that's why I wanted Holly to do it.
He reports his findings on the ancient human fossils in the journal Nature, which is still going strong, by the way. Nature, it's a great scientific journal.
Nature's still going strong, you say?
And he declares them to be...
surely.
No, the journal.
All right.
And declares them to be a new species he names Sinanthropus pekinensis. which is not a kind of Pekingese. It is actually what we now know as Homo erectus.
Marvelous.
It's also Isla Fisher's birthday. So happy birthday to Isla Fisher. It says here, Australian actress for Arrested Development, The Great Gatsby. She was born in Oman. Neglects to mention that she played Becky in Confessions of a Shopaholic, which is one of the best movies ever.
Well,
So
it's probably because you didn't like Big Trouble in Little China.
Probably. You're going to hold that over my head for years, aren't you? Between that and The Spelt.
Well, for my part on this day, well,
you started this.
When do we stop, though?
Now.
On this day. We stop right here, right now, on this day. Okay.
Well.
So, in 1966, the first soft landing on the moon by the Soviet spacecraft Luna 9. It does call into question, were there harder landings which really hurt? Or was this the first one went, or whatever?
It was that one.
It's in Russian.
It's like the Andrex of moon landings.
Everyone has to listen really carefully to catch what he was saying as he landed.
Was the really? I don't know. So yeah, that happened on this day in 1966. And
did anything else happen on this day, Mark?
Yes, it did. And in fact, somebody died.
Oh no! Who died on this day?
On this day, well, in 1959, this was the day the music died, because a plane crash kills musicians Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, J.P. Richardson, aka the Big Bopper, and the pilot, who remains unnamed in this, which I think is a shame, because he had a name. He probably had a family, kids, people who loved him, but he's just the pilot. And they all died near Clear Lake in Iowa. So there you go.
You know
on this day, the music died.
Iowa is 1,000 miles from the sea in any direction.
Well, what are the chances of crash landing in a lake then?
Oh, harsh.
There you go. On this day.
On this day in 1986, Pixar Animation Studios also cropped up, but that's just a minor thing. Right.
The pilot's name was Roger Peterson.
Roger Peterson, we remember you.
On this day.
Right. So, like I said, we wanted to talk about the Hobbit, the movies this time around, because last time we talked about the books, and we had some really nice memories about the books and what they meant to us as children, and we had some great stories, and you could kind of how they inspired us. And I want to talk about that a bit more, probably at the end of this little sequence of things. And I want to say, I don't know how long this is all going to last. We might end up doing 10 pods on the Hobbit. We are known for going on. Like years ago, we used to do this when we were LARPing. We used to go on a yearly trip to the cinema as like a group thing together. One year we went to see like Rogue One, and that was really good. I really enjoyed watching Rogue One. That was a good film.
Yeah,
and then the bastard that used to book in our stuff started taking us to see the Hobbit every year, and that just kind of went gradually downhill. So as we sort of talked about last week, I thought we'd do a long overdue autopsy on the films. Now I wrote a whole sequence of questions, like we did for the Hobbit, last week I found some questions that were drawn out of discussions people were having like in universities and schools and stuff. I thought we'd try some of those. But then when I thought about it today, I thought we had a whole load of stuff we want to talk about. And I think Holly, just before we started this off, kicked this off really well, because yesterday when shopping was taking place for the aforementioned bookcase in IKEA, I was explaining to Holly what we were going to be talking about, and I said that, one of the questions I would ask was, who do you want to be when you grow up from the films? And in preamble to this, you said,
that it's quite difficult for me, but if we're basing it on the books, which obviously we were when we were having the conversation, it's quite difficult for me because there aren't any female characters or even sort of female presenting characters in The Hobbit at all. So, obviously I'd be Bilbo because my very nature is quite hobbity. But there wasn't really a role model. It was very much a boys book for boys. Obviously it's an incredible piece of literature and it spawned amazing things, but I think you can kind of tell that Tolkien was creating this for his son specifically, and it's very full of boy adventures.
What I was going to say was, before we I'm glad you answered that bit, but it is a sausage fest, and they did obviously bring in a female
Toriel.
Tauriel.
But I mean, and immediately we kind of said, well, I said, like, you know, you don't really need to ask why she's in it, because immediately she is the love interest for the dwarf. And well, that's pretty kind of like, you know, as so to speak. It's also, she's a female love interest for the dwarf that looks the least dwarfy of them all. And that's a really big problem for me immediately when I started watching.
He's a handsome, sexy hobbit.
He is
And he's
really
dwarf,
hot.
rather. Yeah, he's a
He's
hot
just
dwarf.
He's really hot, but it makes him more. It kind of
He's
it
Aragorn,
plays.
right?
He's yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't say that he's, you know, like on a scale of, you know, like 1 to 10 movie boyfriends. Aragorn is definitely way higher up that list than Keely. It's Keely. Is it Feely or
as well.
Keely?
Well, this is it, right? Okay, so okay,
But then
Keely, I think, isn't it?
yeah. But then you have to.
He's
you
Tory
have,
Lucashield. He's the guy in charge.
no,
No, we're talking about the love
no,
interest.
we're not talking.
Oh, yeah, the other guy. Yes,
Yeah.
It's about sexy dwarf man.
both of them.
But
Both of them
Thorin
are-
Oakenshield looks very, very, very human, and he is probably higher up the list again. I love a bit of Thorin Oakenshield. Richard Armitage. Whew. Saw him
Married to
in
Keely Hawes.
Uncle Vanya once, and I was like 3 rows back from the stage. It was glorious.
You almost smell him.
Yeah, almost. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. She is brought in largely as
It's a love triangle, isn't it?
It is,
yes,
I can't
because
remember. Who's the
Legolas.
third? Oh, it's
Legolas.
is it?
And can you, like, so this is one of the big points I want to talk about. So like that underlines immensely, like, kind of the whole. So it's Warner Brothers. They've got the IP and they've made a lot of money out of Lord of the Rings, and they've turned that into 3 films. They're like, yo, who was it first? It was Del Toro, wasn't it? Del Toro.
Del Toro was going to do a 2-movie adaptation.
Yeah, do a couple of movies, and he was like, at the end, he went, "No, I'm not doing it." And then they got
Peter
Jackson back in, and was like, you know, do 3, and he was like, "Oh, I can do that. I've done it before." But
Yeah, but he didn't want to do it.
No, he
didn't.
Because
He absolutely
didn't want to do it because you had 13 dwarves in it. So how the fuck are you going to do a film with 13 dwarves?
so yeah, we go on to that really easily, because you can go like, these 2-second films have nothing really relating to the book in them. There's no original material.
No,
cannot
and they
imagine-
lose dwarves.
Well,
Like
I
they just
cannot imagine
shed dwarves all over the place.
Tolkien
Sorry.
sat down when he was reading it to his son and thought to himself, what is the one thing that this book, this story that I'm telling my child is really missing? It's got to be a love triangle, right? That's the bit of the story. Yeah, that's kind of where he went down that road. And there's so much of it for the book. And if you want to talk about 13 Dwarves, and I will shut up in a second, I found this is one of the most grating things I found in the whole lot of films, was that when I read The Hobbit, I can manage 13 dwarves in my head, right? When if I was to get the dwarves up on my screen, right on my phone right now,
Could not name them.
No.
Name this fucker, you would know. Have no
I
idea.
would know.
Not a
I would
clue.
know Thorin,
Yeah, the human.
Oakenshield. I'd lose and Keely
yeah.
and Feely, but I'd have to point at both of them simultaneously
Yeah.
because I cannot remember
Keely,
which one is
Feely.
fucking which.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And Balin.
Bomber or,
Yeah, I mean,
or
Buffer, Biffer, Bumber, both.
John Paul, Ringo.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah, all of them. Sneezy, Dopey.
It's just, I think, for me, like, the worst part about that is that they have tried really hard to make them all look different. And they've tried really hard to give them, like, really over-the-top characteristics so that it's really obvious, so that they're distinctive, and they're still not distinctive.
No.
And the idea that you're stretching one quite small book into 3 movies means that you don't. I mean, first, you don't have enough plot in the first place, right? There is not enough plot in that book to
Which
fill
is
3
why they
movies.
have to nick from the Silmarillion.
Which is why they've nicked from the Silmarillion, but also it's why they keep shedding dwarves. Like, they have to leave, like, some of them behind because they're injured or because they've had a bop on the head or one of them overslept or whatever and they've missed the fucking boat.
You want to get shot by a fucking Morgul? What is it? What
It's a Morgul arrow.
Which only the high elite dudes of fucking, and it's an orc just shoots him with an arrow. He's nicked off of one of the ring raves.
Just got one. It's just, and that whole like. Oh, I just can't. I loved the first film. I loved An Unexpected Journey. When I watched it, I had such high hopes. I thought,
who's that?
That is
Bomber?
no, that's not Bomber. That's Gloin. It's Gloin.
I don't know what you mean.
It's glowing because at some point he opens he's got like sketches of
What?
he's got sketches of his wife and he's got sketches of Gimli, and Legolas is like, oh, is that your brother? Like, when it's his wife, like, Legolas is just really rude to him. And he's the only ginger one. That's the only reason I
gave you these one. Actually, that's Bomber.
Oh, bollocks.
Well, I don't think there was a bollocks, but there could have been one.
But this is what I mean. Like, you know, I loved an unexpected journey because it was
looking all human.
God, I'd do him.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm feeling firm right now.
100%. But it's just
You'd
like
have to stand on a stool.
I loved the first one because it was very Hobbity. It was very like the colours in my head were overly saturated. It felt more childlike at the beginning, you know? Like
100% Tolkien though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the whole kind of that was super Tolkien. And it was wonderful and I loved it. And the casting is phenomenal. Martin Freeman is an incredible Bilbo.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fish out of water story, right?
Yeah.
He is in
no one does that better.
Is surprised looking.
I mean, that's why he was the only thing that worked in Hitchhikers.
Well, him and Slarty Bartfast.
Yeah.
True that.
Perfect casting.
But it's, you know, like I loved it because I think they got big Bjorn. Bjorn was great. Loved Bjorn and his giant bees.
Yeah, that was first film.
Yeah, I loved. Obviously, Gandalf is just incredible. I thought Sylvester McCoy made the absolute perfect Radagast.
Not in the books.
Absolutely not in the books. But I mean, you know, he's there, and we know that he exists in the universe. And I thought his casting was great. The whole orc thing just really pissed me off immediately. I was like, you do not need to invent although I do love I do love like the Gundawan orcs, and that's purely because Gundabad orcs, purely because there's a footballer called Gundawan, and there's a footballer called Gundawan, and I can say that he's like a Gundabad orc. Yeah, when he does something particularly egregious.
Did you find anything positive about the first film, Mark?
Did I? I liked it enough to feel that I was back in Peter Jackson's world. I liked it enough because it felt like we were following the book. Yeah, and it was you know, that opening in the Shire. It's that, I mean, that really swelled my heart in the first Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah, where it opens up in the Shire. It's just, this is beautiful. So it was nice to return to that. That one of the big problems I had with the first film was not the story, it was the high frame rate that it was shot in. And a lot of people have complained about this. It was shot in ultra high frame rate, which made it look, to me, like daytime soap TV. It looked like an episode of, I don't know, Coronation Street or something.
Why they did that?
And it's that I see you can have the setting on modern TVs as well. And I know a couple of people have got their TVs set to this mode, and there's something about it. It's just too realistic. Yeah, it is too crisp. It looks like you're looking through a window at, you know, people on the other side of a window. I think cinema has its own look. It has its own filter. I honestly can't explain it any better than saying that it looked too crisp. It looked too much like TV, too much like daytime TV. And that was a really weird thing for me to get my head around. It messes with my head and it takes me out of the film, because it also, the issue with it is every single detail is really like, ooh, look, So it must be a nightmare for the props maker and especially the FX makeup.
They didn't do any props.
Well, the FX makeup artists, on all the dwarves, must have just been like, oh, Jesus, really? We go, okay, super high frame rate.
Oh, well, they didn't bother with 2 dwarves. They went, fuck it. They've got a beard. They'll do.
Yeah.
Next.
I found that took me out of it.
No, that's understandable. I found it very similar because everything was so CGI'd, right? And now
that's the other thing.
Particularly when they're riding out the Shire, and I remember the scene really clearly when they're on their horses. I remember thinking, my God, that looks really, like you say, it looked really, perfectly crisp. I guess is exactly what you've just. I remember that really clearly. Now you said it. I remember them riding out, and they're on, and you see like Bilbo go past on the horse. It's all really kind of I remember thinking, my God, that's really over the top. I don't know what. I couldn't at the time tell you what it is, but obviously it's what you're explaining.
Read up about it.
Running out horses with CGI though.
Well, another big complaint. I mean, I'm moving beyond the first film here, but we'll come back to it. But it was that they'd done all this wonderful physical, practical makeup work on the orcs in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And in The Hobbit, they just fucking CGI'd all the bastards.
That's the first film.
And they looked so fake compared to the actual practical, physical orcs there. And why they did it, I don't know. It smacked to me of that point in filmmaking where CGI was coming in and suddenly everything had to be CGI because, hey, this is the new tool in the box. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't have that solidity. It doesn't have that grounding. It doesn't have that realism that somebody in a fucking costume charging down the hill waving a practical sword at you has.
No matter how lifelike the motion, it's always just not quite lifelike enough, and it never will be.
In the last film, in the Battle of the 5, 6, 4, however many armies that were supposed to. Oh yeah, I know, but there were.
Don't forget the war rams, the stupid fucking war rams.
All of it was CGI, right? So you've got and it was the longest on-screen battle they had in all of the Lord of the Rings films.
It was toss.
And it was just it was basically like watching a computer game. It's just it's like a cutscene, and it was so bad. But yeah, it's like you were saying, Mike, like we discussed in Star Wars. Yeah, it's that whole. It was like them, wasn't it, when they did everything in CGI and green screen, and it was just awful. It was Ian McKellen, didn't he? He had this big. His interviews were really heart wrenching because it was
he was in tears.
He was in tears doing filming because he was just sat in a green room on his own for hours and hours, just sat there, and he broke down during filming and tried to stop because he was just sat there on his own for hours in a room of green. Yeah, that's fucking stupid.
Nobody
it's like
needs
Guantanamo Bay.
It probably isn't.
Nobody should be making
it's sensory deprivation.
Yes. No, nobody should be making Ian McKellen cry.
No one.
No.
Ever.
Unless it's like really good opera or something that he's loving, and that's allowed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Happy tears.
I just want to pop back to The Hobbit for a minute, because I really wanted to make, I think probably the point that made the least sense to me, and it really upset me about the rest of the films, and you could see it coming after the first one, is, obviously you're not going to get free films of content that's just from The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit is half the length of the first Lord of the Rings book, which is the Fellowship.
It's about 300 odd pages.
They got one film out of the Fellowship, right? And that was that. And then they moved on to the next book. To try and get 3 books out of a film half the size was stupid. But by the end of film one rather, as far as I could tell, even though they only got as far in the story as they had, like Bilbo had finished his journey already. He'd grown up, he'd done all this stuff, and after that, he just wasn't in it. For a film called The Hobbit, he is barely in any more of the 2 films that come out. In the last one, he's in it for like 2 minutes, and then that's it. He's just unconscious as he's supposed to be. But the battle was supposed to last 3 pages, not an entire film. But he seems to have done all his growing up, all his kind of like being brave, is encountering everything by the end of the first film, which to me made very little sense. Go on, Beans.
Because of this, I want to talk about Legolas's dad.
Do we have to?
Oh, we do.
Cinnamon.
Thranduil will. Those words.
Good old Cinnamon.
You're thinking of Celeborn, who is a completely different elf.
They are. It's hard to tell. They look the same to me.
No, they don't.
Long hair.
Thranduil has the eyebrows. And
Like,
he rides a moose. A moose! For fuck's sake. And he's there all high and mighty and the Arkenstone. And it's just, he is... the actor whose name temporarily escapes me is a phenomenal actor. He's an absolutely phenomenal actor. And I've seen so many incredible things from him filming The Hobbit. Especially sort of because they put him on a horse, which ironically was called Moose, and he had to ride the horse around, and then they CGI'd, and then they had to CGI the horse into the giant moose elky thing that he actually was riding around on, and it would not behave. It would not pay any attention to anything, and as soon as he stopped it would start like edging forward again, so they had to in the end CGI a lot more of the moose. But why is he there? He doesn't need to be there. He doesn't need to be in the film at all. The only reason that Thranduil is in that film is to Romeo and Juliet, Legolas and Tauriel. It's the only reason he's there. Legolas is there because they needed more of a hook, and Orlando Bloom had run out of money, maybe. I don't know. Probably not.
Well, can we talk about Tauriel?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think we're going to split this into two halves of like a different episodes. I reckon we should spend the rest of this pod, which is probably about 5 more minutes, talking about Tauriel. Let's do that.
Okay. Well, for me, obviously there were no female characters in The Hobbit. Yeah, Tolkien didn't really write female characters other than being Galadriel, the untouchable, or Eowyn, I'm not a man. I'm not a man. I'm going to kill you.
Plucky. Eowyn the Plucky.
Yeah. So,
and Arwen, obviously.
You can see that the studios obviously went, God damn, we can't make a film without a woman in it. And they bottled it. Okay, they go, we're going to have to put a love interest in because everybody wants to see a love interest. You don't see a film without a love interest. But this is where I was going to say that elbowing Kurt Russell into this, yeah?
Is it overboard?
No, it's not. It's The Thing.
Okay.
Yeah? John Carpenter's The Thing.
We did watch the trailer for that the other day. It looked bollocks.
What, The Thing? Oh, dear. God, why are you on this podcast?
Because I'm entertaining.
Just to understand, they put a trailer for every single John Carpenter film, including whatever that first one was.
The Thing is glorious.
Space arsehole.
Space. It was. There was some.
Smashers. Planet Smashers.
Planet Smashers.
Oh God, that was bad. Holly had to watch a lot of really awful adverts for really bad John Carpenter films.
Okay, well, trust me, The Thing is a classic, and it's in my top 5 all-time favorite films.
Okay, right, I'll give it a go.
But the thing about the Thing is actually something that didn't occur to me for years, which is going to sound ridiculous, but it didn't occur to me for years until it went. Actually, it's an entirely male cast. In that there is not a single woman in that cast, and the film doesn't suffer from it. You don't even pay any attention to the fact that there are no women in that film. But what it does do is removes all of that. Well, we've got to have a love interest there. If there's a female character, there's somebody's got a fancy, or she's got all of that. It removed all of that. Now, the studio for The Hobbit, you can see that they just weren't that brave. Because they could have made The Hobbit without any female characters in. They didn't need to.
They didn't. They absolutely didn't.
She was crowbarred in, and the love interest was crowbarred in. But for me, that shows just the studio process that, hey, we've got to tick boxes here. We have to have a female character in there. There has to be a love interest in here, and we have to make this book into a trilogy which will make us another $1 billion, and it has to feel like The Lord of the Rings. We want the same tone. And all of those things that they did to The Hobbit stopped it being The Hobbit. Like we were discussing the previous episode, that Tolkien himself actually went back and tried to rewrite The Hobbit to fit in closer in tone to The Lord of the Rings, and got to the 3rd chapter and went, nah, this is bollocks. because everybody else was telling him that it wasn't The Hobbit anymore. And that's what they did with this film.
But that's because Tolkien understood that literature grows with your audience, right? If you start writing, if I started writing a 7-book series aimed at 11-year-olds, by the time I finish my 7th book, I'm not writing for 11-year-olds anymore. I'm writing for teenagers. I'm writing for young adults, right?
Yeah.
So, and Tolkien understood that if you write a children's book, by the time they finish that children's book and they move on, your audience is going to grow with that, and you as an author need to grow along with it. What The Hobbit did for the film was go, okay, we've had the incredible. It's another reason why prequels don't work in film particularly well.
Prequel, though, was it? They made it second. That's just
that's another thing. About when The Hobbit was written, The Lord of the Rings hadn't been written.
Yeah.
But this way around, The Lord of the Rings had been filmed, but The Hobbit hadn't been made. So it's reversed the polarity of the neutron flow.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there, because next time.
But I don't want to. I want to.
No, I want to carry on ranting it.
Next time we can dig straight into the plate of fuck me, they should have made these in a better order. Why the fuck, if you look at it as the books are written, why the fuck was it Sauron even in it? He hadn't even been created when they wrote The Hobbit. It wasn't written in that style, So there's a lot to discuss, and we'll get onto that next time. So let's see if I can
hold it in for a week now.
It has been wondrous to converse with Mark and Holly, to tread the storied paths of Middle Earth once more. We shall return anon to crown the thrill that have been The Hobbit. And on that note, exeunt stage left. It's Amalgulach for me, and that's not Klingon, that's Dwarven. For farewell.
Right, okay. I just want to say that I actually really do love Orlando Bloom. This
isn't a fan letter. It's a goodbye end of the podcast. Jesus.
That's goodbye from me.
You can cut that bit out.
I quite like Keira Knightley. There's a connection there. They were both in Pirates of the Caribbean. Should have made a good elf.
Cha.
Good night.
Good night. Farewell.
Bye. You have been listening to A Geek Tragedy with me, Plague Mantle, and my best friend, the excellent Holly Properly, and our actually famous guy, Mark Caldery. If you like this, there is plenty more at patreon.com/A Geek Tragedy. Production is by Kit Bretnell. Our logo and artwork is by markcaldery.com. Music is by Borislaw Kozielski. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Geek Tragedy. Email us at geektragedypodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. And don't forget to tell all your geeky friends. Also, a big shout out to all of our genius geeks. We adore each and every one of you. And of course, much love. Take care of each other.